Hi there everyone and welcome back to powerupwithphil.com. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the latest content. Anyway, in today's video, I'm diving into the world of data integration by exploring how to access Snowflake data in Power Apps. So Snowflake, as many of you will know, is a popular cloud-based data platform that has really revolutionized the way businesses handle their data storage and also their processing needs as well. Power Apps and Power Platform, on the other hand, is of course the powerful Microsoft tool that allows us to create custom applications without writing a single line of code. We can also access data via Microsoft Dataverse as well, which is the Power Platform's native database solution. So when you combine these two powerhouses, you can get a really seamless experience in data-driven app development. So throughout this tutorial, I'll guide you through step by step on how to establish that connection between Snowflake and Power Apps, retrieve the data you need, and then of course use it in a Microsoft Power App. So sit back and relax, and let's get started on unlocking the full potential of Snowflake data in Power Apps. Firstly, there's really two main ways that we can connect to Snowflake data. One is quite advanced, which means we need to create a new OData connection to Snowflake, and an OData connection is really an API integration between Dataverse and an external data provider, in this case Snowflake, which allows us to access that Snowflake data, but then also can allow our users to edit and amend that data and update it actually back into Snowflake. But that's not what we want to do at this stage. We're just going through the basics here of how to retrieve Snowflake data, or data held within Snowflake tables and databases, should I say. But to only view that, we only want to consume that data or make it available to our app users. So what I'm showing you in this video has no ability whatsoever to write back to Snowflake. So any of you from a compliance or governance background, hopefully that ticks a few boxes for you. There's no way by using this method that anyone can write or change even, or delete for that matter, any data within Snowflake. So it's important that when you work through this tutorial, that the user account that you have on Snowflake is following the principle of least privilege. In this case, just being able to read that data, which is what many Snowflake user accounts are actually there for, especially if your Snowflake databases and tables contain sensitive or, in some cases, customer data. So, diving straight into the detail, let's go into our Snowflake instance. Now, I have here a Snowflake trial account set up, which is purely for this tutorial. And all I've done is created a new database here, a local database. But in this demonstration, we're going to use the Snowflake sample data database, and the table within it, or the database within that, should I say, of tpch underscore sf1. And the reason I'm using this one is because the table we're going to use, or connect to, should I say, in this demonstration is the customer table, and it has a nice amount of rows in there, 150,000 rows, and is 10.3 megabytes overall. If we take a quick look at that particular table, you'll see there's lots of rows there, 150,000 rows, and a handful of columns as well. Seems to be showing customer IDs, made up addresses, comments, segments, balances, etc. But the principle here is to connect to that data. But following this principle, once we've done it once, we can then add in other tables. Any related tables that you may have in Snowflake can also be carried over to Dataverse. So let's get going. First off though, in a sticky note, what I need you to do is, in your Snowflake instance, down in the bottom left hand corner, is copy your account URL. So I'm going to copy my account URL and paste it here in the sticky note. And you'll notice that your account unique identifier, straight after the HTTPS, followed by where your Snowflake instance has been provisioned and on what service. Mine here is UK South, so the London data center, and I'm using Microsoft Azure for this, but you can connect to any Snowflake instance, as long as, of course, you have the right privileges to log in and see the data itself. So I've made a note here of that account URL, the table, the database I'm going to be connecting to, and then the table name, which in this case is customer. So before we go into our actual Canvas app and use some Snowflake data, we need to create that connection. So in the Power Apps Studio or the Power Apps Maker portal, on the left hand side, if you go to Data Flows, so what you see here is simply the option to create a data flow, which we're going to select, and then select Start from Blank. What we need to do here is give our data flow a name. In this case, I'm going to call it Snowflake Demo, and then click Create. This brings us through to the Power Query Editor, and any of you that have used or familiar with Power BI will be very familiar with Power Query. However, this first stage is really listing all the pre-built connectors or integrations for external data sources that Microsoft have pre-built for us, or some independent publishers in some cases have pre-built for us. So what you'll see here is, of course, Snowflake. There's many others that we can connect to: Amazon Redshift, Azure Data Explorer via Custo, Azure Data Lake, Synapse, Parquet, XML, JSON, etc., etc. In this case, we're going to be selecting Snowflake. So what we need to do now is enter our server name. So if we go back to what we copied earlier, that URL, we copy everything other than the https:// and pop that into the server name. So this is identifying your instance of Snowflake. Then we need to connect to a particular warehouse. And if we go back into Snowflake itself, under the admin section, you'll see the warehouses that you actually have. And the standard one that is automatically provisioned is compute_WH, so the compute warehouse. And this is in a started state with a size of extra small. If you create a new warehouse, by all means connect to that, but it must be in a started state. So you must resume that particular warehouse before it can be connected to, in order to create and maintain that live connection in Power Apps. So if I put in here a compute_WH, so we want to connect to that warehouse, which then contains our databases and our tables within it. We then need to create a new connection, and the connection I'm going to be using here is basic, and we need to enter our Snowflake credentials in here. If I go ahead and do that, password as well, then we click Next. What this does is create that connection for us into Snowflake right from Power Apps, or right from Dataverse, as it's going to be very shortly. So if we hop back into Snowflake very quickly and go to the Data tab, you'll see that our three databases there are now appearing in the Power Query Editor. Let's go back to our sticky note, and we wanted this particular database and this particular table. We're going to Snowflake Sample Data, find that database, and select the table that we need. What you'll see here is then a preview of that data in very much the same way as a preview in Snowflake generates. It does exactly the same thing here really in the Power Query Editor. What we'll then do, hit Transform Data. This gives us the opportunity, should we wish to convert the formatting of the data which is coming from Snowflake. So, for example, the customer key at the moment is set to decimal number. The customer name, or the C_name column, is set to text. So we can manipulate this data as we wish. We could remove columns, we could remove rows that we're not interested in connecting to, and we could also remove errors or filter this data down as we wanted. That may be useful, especially on very, very large data tables in Snowflake where you're only interested in certain parameters. So you're filtering the data to, let's say, the rows that were created in the last week or the last day. And doing such can be very effective to make this connection to the refresh connecting to that data much quicker. However, for this demo, we haven't got that many rows and that many columns, so we're just going to go here, click Next. What this then brings us through to is a set of three options. Do we want to load this data to a new Dataverse table, an existing table, or not load it at all? So the do not load is when you want to create this connection, but you don't actually want to get that data yet. So this can be useful if you're, developing a connection to Snowflake, but you don't want to get all that data over yet. You don't want to make that data visible yet. That's a good option to use. Load to an existing table is where maybe you've done all the hard work of creating a Dataverse table, which may contain other data, and you just want to load this data to it, or we can load it to a new table. I'm going to do that. I'm going to load it to a new table today, and you can see that automatically the destination column names have been created for us, as well as the destination column type. I'm just going to change the table name, however, though. And the reason for that is because in the Power environment, there's automatically a table called customer on some instances. So I'm going to call this customer Snowflake, just to differentiate it, if you like, from anything else in our environment already. Okay, I'm happy with that. If we then go ahead and click Next. We've now got the option to select how often the Power Query or the data flow itself gets the latest data from Snowflake. How often does it refresh, in other words? So by default, it's set to refresh manually, and that is simply a case of you going into the flow and asking it to refresh on demand. But usually refresh automatically is a winner, because then that burden is sort of taken off of us. So let's say we want to refresh this every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes. I think it's the minimum. Yep, it's a minimum we can go down to 30 minutes, refresh it every half an hour. And we want to start this refresh tomorrow at, let's say 6 o'clock. Let's say our data warehouse gets fully updated in Snowflake at 4 a.m. So we want to get this 2 hours later. Or alternatively, we could only refresh it on specific days and times, which also might be useful. But we're going to do the frequency-based refresh. And I'm going to tick this box to send me an email should this data flow refresh ever fail. I want to be alerted to that, so I can go in and make any tweaks or error handling as I need to ensure that this data connection remains live. So then once that's done, we just simply click Publish. And what we'll notice here is the grey bar at the top saying that your data flow was saved and publishing is in progress. So what this does in 2 stages is publish your data flow and make it available. So really sort of make it live and active on your environment or in your Power Platform instance. Once publishing is complete, it will then do its first initial refresh. But it's not really a refresh, because this is the first time it's going to be populated with data. This can take a little while, especially if you've got a lot of rows in there. However, on subsequent refreshes, you will find it's a lot quicker, because it's only going to be updating those rows where the data has changed or new data has been added. We're now into the published status, which is great, and the data is currently refreshing, so that in progress there is grabbing that latest data for us. So I'm going to pause there, and we're going to wait until this data refresh has completed, and then we can take a look at what that data looks like and also then utilize it critically in a Power App as well. Okay, so when your data flow has finished, if you go into tables and then into custom, you'll see the data table that you've created with all your imported Snowflake data. So this took around 15 minutes to import those 150,000 rows, or 17 minutes since we created it, which isn't too bad for a first import. So data flow is not the quickest thing in the world, and there are quicker methods out there, but we're covering the basics here about being able to leverage that data in a safe and secure way. Okay, so if we head over to our Power App, what you'll see here is I've created a blank canvas app as we've previously done before, and I'm going to insert a gallery. In this case, I'm going to use a blank vertical gallery. Add that into our app just there, and then hit connect to data. Now, automatically what will be available is your newly created Dataverse table, which I call customer Snowflake. But of course here is pluralized because that's where it represents data or data connection. We're then really free to list that data and manipulate it how we want. So let's add a text label, and what you'll see after the this item property, so think of that as this row, all of the Dataverse column names, which in this case are mirrored to the column names in our Snowflake table. So I'm going to select C_name up here, resize the gallery so we can get more rows visible at one time. Let's then add another text label, and let's say we want to bring back here the market segment, for example, like that. We then want another text label, let's say through phone as an example. Let's put a border around our gallery to stand out a little bit more, hit play, and there we go. This is represented or makes your Snowflake data available within the Power Platform, in this case within Power Apps. Now this is a simplified way of obtaining data from Snowflake. It is also not the fastest possible way. If you have a lot of rows or a lot of columns within your Snowflake data table, this can take a while to import the data into Dataverse. However, by doing it via the data flow way, you're eliminating any possible way that a user can write back to Snowflake. There is such a thing as a virtual table. Now, the new way of creating virtual tables that Microsoft have released doesn't currently support Snowflake integration. It's currently only supporting SharePoint and SQL Server. However, I'm sure Snowflake will come as a connector. There is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, another way of connecting to Snowflake, which does create a virtual table by creating a new OData connection within the Power Platform Advanced Settings area. However, as we're just covering the basics here, this is a safe and secure way to ensure that if you only have read-only access in your Snowflake area, or your Snowflake instance, so you've got a new role that's been created or a custom role that's been created to allow your users to just view data that you're happy with them to use. This is a way of them being able to obtain that data and leverage it in the Power Platform. Should be aware that this does create a copy of the data within Dataverse. However, due to the automatic refresh settings that we put on, we are ensuring that this data is constantly kept up to date. So this is going through the principles. There are obviously additional security elements that should be considered, which is, for example, creating copies of data, which this is in effect doing. But this is a quick and easy way of achieving what can be sometimes a very complicated end goal. What I would advise is that data does not persist for very long within Dataverse, and that custom security roles and column level security is implemented to ensure that this data can only be accessed by those who you want it to be shared with. I'd also advise that automatic data deletion is turned on for the particular table, so at a set period, whether this be hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, this data table is emptied, and the refresh settings are adjusted to something more suited to your organization and what you need it for. As we work forwards throughout this series of videos, I will be covering virtual tables, and we can work through how those can connect also to Snowflake, but other data sources as well, and allow, again, that data connection. But virtual tables, by their very nature, do not create copies of data, and only populate with data, so to speak, at runtime. So when somebody or something calls on that table to grab its data from an external data source, that's the only time that it is populated. However, as I say, we're covering the basics here, so I hope this was helpful. Let me know any questions or comments, but hopefully this will allow you to work with your Snowflake data in a low or no code fashion. Thanks very much.